It changed my view about everything. I used to write checks to the ACLU, to Planned Parenthood, and now they are enemy number one. This is what happens. They plant the seed into a child that they could be born wrong and that maybe life would be better if they transitioned. I was no longer mom. I was Erin. This is a calling card for pedophiles. Is this a civil rights movement? No. This is all about money and sex. Each one of these trans-identified children is worth $1 million to the medical community.
So Erin, let's get right into it. You're here to share a very interesting story, an alarming story, but thankfully it ends up positive. Tell us, when did all of this start? How old was your daughter and what happened?
So it really began when she was in 7th grade and she went through the sex ed curriculum at her public school. And unbeknownst to me, they have 5 hours of sex ed. They bring in a third party to teach it. And on the 5th day, they spend an entire hour on gender identity. So
and where was this? Is it a public school or a private school?
It was a public school.
A public school in Northern California?
Correct. Yeah. And so for an entire hour, they learned that they could be born wrong. The doctor could have made a mistake. There's all these different genders. You can have a male body and a female brain and vice versa. So all these kids came over to my house after Friday and they were sitting in my front yard and they were all discussing their gender identities. And each one of these girls, and there were 5 of them, each one of them picked something other than straight white girl. There was pansexual, there was lesbian, polyamorous, and I'm listening to them and my head is spinning around. Why are 11 and 12-year-olds talking about being pansexual and polyamorous? This isn't making sense to me. And they looked at me and said, "Oh, you're cis," and started to giggle, which I had never even heard that term. So I had gone to the parent course that was offered by the school to understand, like, what are they teaching these kids? And in that course, I was given an 8x11 sheet of all the different gender identities, demi-boy, non-binary, all these terms that were senseless to me. And many of the parents were sitting there just shaking their heads, going along. And my hand just kept shooting up, like, this doesn't make sense.
So for the sake of this interview, we'll call your daughter Patricia. So Patricia participated in these classes, these gender-affirming classes, which they called sex ed. And then what happened?
So then COVID hit the next year. And so this is what happens. They plant the seed into a child that they could be born wrong and that maybe life would be better if they transitioned. So over COVID, when she was lonely, locked up in her room, living online, living in this virtual reality, started to go through puberty, body changes that she didn't like. Then she took on a transgender identity. And I found that out because I could hear the teachers calling her a male name and using male pronouns through her iPad.
How long was she identifying as a male before you found out?
I really don't know, because there was a period of time where she started to cover up her body, wore big sweatshirts, cut her hair, started to get very despondent. But I took it as normal because when I started to develop, I also wore big sweatshirts. I wore baggy clothes. I didn't really want my body to be changing and I didn't want people to see it. So I took it as, this is just growing pains, normal. And then I heard the name being called, a male name, male pronouns. And then she came out to us and said, "I'm really a boy."
Erin, while she was hiding this, did the school know about it? And did the school communicate with you, the teachers, the administration?
Oh, no. This was the best kept secret. No, the school did not alert me at all. And then when I called the school, I was very angry and basically said, "How dare you change my daughter's name?" And they proceeded to tell me that they needed to be the safe space for my child. And I asked them to define what safe meant. And they couldn't.
What does it mean they changed her name? Was her name changed at school? The teachers, the kids, they were calling her by a different name, and at home you didn't know?
Correct. So they were calling her a male name and using male pronouns at school, on online school. All of her homework and all of her assignments were in a male name using and male pronouns.
Did you attend any parent-teacher conferences where you met the teachers? Did they talk to you about her, I don't know, her academic achievements or anything? Was there any communication whatsoever with the school where they just decided to omit the information about her transitioning?
There was zero communication. Remember, this was COVID, so she had never stepped foot into this new high school that she was going to. So these teachers didn't know her. They'd never met her, but they changed her name and pronouns. And then when I called and told them, why are you doing this? Again, they said, we're a safe space. I said, please define what safe means. That must mean that I'm unsafe because I call my daughter her legal name, her female name. And apparently I was unsafe because Child Protective Services showed up at my house, and so did the police.
Who called the services?
The school.
They called Child Protective Services on you for asking why are they transitioning your kid?
I don't know the reason. They claim that they saw my daughter searching on her school iPad how many monster drinks it takes to kill a 110-pound girl. And so they used that as she's thinking about suicide. But it was right after I read them the riot act about calling my daughter by a different name. So there's two things there that are really important. Schools are spying on our kids through their iPads. They're watching what these kids are doing, and they're not telling the parents. And then, like I said, they sent Child Protective Services to my home, and that was the end. I pulled her from the public school.
So instead of calling you when they identified a problem, they called the government.
Correct.
When you reacted the way you reacted, as a normal mama bear should, what was the reaction from the community and the administration and the teachers?
Well, they were unkind to me. They thought I was the one with the problem. And they told me that they didn't need permission from me to call my daughter whatever name she wanted to be called.
Was your daughter assigned a therapist or whatever it is that the school believes is the proper guide for your child, or did they just push her to transition without telling the parents? Like, what was the behind the scenes stuff that they were doing that you later discovered?
I really don't know, because it was the beginning of the school year and I pulled her, but I mean, shame on them if they had a school therapist involved and didn't involve me. That's a no-fly zone. You don't do that. Even if it's legal, you don't do that.
Is it legal? Is it legal for the school to call on a therapist to work with the child behind the parent's back?
It is. In the state of California, if the child is 12 or older, the child could go see a therapist without the parent's knowledge or permission.
And so this therapist could work with the child to transition and change their gender while telling them not to tell their parents.
It happens all the time. This is what happens in our state, that the therapist will have meetings with the student unbeknownst to the parent, pulling the child out of class and concretizing a gender identity behind the parent's back. It happens all the time.
Did your daughter ever tell you that she felt that her instructors or teachers, the administrators, discouraged her from talking to you?
No, we never had that discussion. I mean, it was pretty immediate that I pulled her out of the public school. I knew the public school was the problem, and so I took her out of.
Once you pulled her out of the public school, I'm assuming at that point she still identified as a boy. What was her reaction? What was the relationship that you had with her at that point in time?
Well, she had sunk into a very deep depression, and this is normal for a trans-identified child, because what the child is believing is that everything is wrong with them, that they were born wrong. So imagine being an adolescent, going through all these changes with your body, and then believing that you are wrong and everything is wrong about you, and the only way to fix yourself is to get body parts removed and to go on to drugs, get different hormones. That's a horrible thing to say to a child. And so, their self-esteem just plummets. She was also told by people online that if your parents don't accept that you're a boy, that they don't love you. And she was taught to disengage with her family. So I was no longer mom. I was Erin. She no longer called me mom. This is what they teach them to do, to separate from the person who loves them most. Again, imagine what it does to a child's psyche to hear from the masses online or teachers that your mom does not love you. Only I do. And you need to escape your parents. And that's what they told my child.
I'd imagine that some of the people who are listening to this conversation might be saying to themselves, this couldn't happen to me. I'm very involved in my child's life. I have conversations with my child. I can't ever imagine. I would totally notice if my daughter, how could this mom not notice that this daughter is having this secret life? What's your answer to that? Are you an uninvolved mom?
Not even close. So I got the volunteer award at the grade school because I volunteered so much. I drove for every school trip. I ran the, walk a jog. I was at that school all the time. I was a very involved mom. I checked her phone also. Now, these kids are smart, and maybe that's where I will fall on my sword, but she had fake accounts so that what I would look at on her phone was tame, and I didn't know that there were secret accounts beneath this. Also, they do this through their iPads through school. So you can be on top of it. And I was on top of it. And your child can still get caught in this. I have a son who is less than 2 years older than she is. We did everything as a family. One child got caught in the web and one did not. So parents, had I known what I know now, I never would have given my daughter an iPhone. I never would have sent her to public school. I never would have let her go through sex ed. Those are things that I didn't know I should have done, which in hindsight I would have.
So I think one of the things that parents are afraid of is when you pull your child out of school and, they have their friends and they have this mindset where they really believe that what they're doing is right because the entire community is affirming this gender change, that they would just push their child away. There is this fear to be strong about it because you're worried that if you push too hard, you lose your child. But you pushed pretty hard. You yanked her out and you were very, very strong about it. Can you just describe that to me? What were those feelings? And how did you know to do that and not be afraid that you're just going to completely lose her altogether if you push so hard?
Well, I didn't listen to anyone, is really what happened. I didn't listen to one piece of advice. I followed my mom gut. And my mom gut said, take away the phone. Pull her from the school. Look, you have a very limited time to get your child out of this. You have until they're 18. And so if a child comes out at 15, you've got 3 years and that clock is ticking. And doing the dance and not addressing the elephant in the room, I don't know one parent who've gotten their child out of it. All the parents that I know who have success stories did what I did. And that is compassion and love, but setting boundaries. It's really important for parents to understand that we have lost our parenting power to the internet and to our schools, and we need to reclaim it, and we need to set really good boundaries and not be afraid for our child to not like us. My daughter said horrible things to me while she was coming out of her gender fog. Hateful, terrible, brutal things. And it was my job to take those and return with love. And sometimes when I couldn't take it, I had to walk away and I had to take a day, and I didn't always react properly. But to love your child is to take that for the greater good, because again, you're on borrowed time. You have a very short period of time before your child is going to be irreversibly harmed. So I went about it very directly. Once my daughter was mentally stable, there was a period of time, like I said, when she was very, very depressed, where I had to tiptoe a lot more. But as she started to heal, I made it very clear. I don't believe anybody can change sex. I don't believe you are a boy. You will never be a boy. This is impossible. All this stuff is made up. They're taking advantage of you. They're lying to you. Who's making the money from this? You're getting fooled.
You said all these things to her, and what was her reaction?
Sometimes it was anger. A lot of the things that I did was I would drop something. I'd drop a line at her, and then I would walk away. So I wouldn't wait for a reaction, so I wouldn't have a fight with her. So I would talk about social contagions, and we would run down different social contagions like eating disorders and bulimia and the laughing social contagion and the fainting social contagion. And then I would end with, some people think trans is a social contagion. And then I would walk away and let it just sit in her brain so that she would start using her critical mind and thinking like, maybe it is. So I did a lot of that.
How long did it take from her being so angry with you to the point where she started understanding that she was being pushed to do something horrific to herself?
It took about 1.5 years to get her out, and it took another probably 6 months before she said thank you.
Wow. So long time, a lot of patience, a lot of strength. Are there things that you remember that if somebody is going through this right now, because I know a lot of parents are going through this right now, in the early stages, which I'd imagine are the hardest times where you're just kind of like in the storming phase, things that you remember doing that were really helpful, where you started seeing changes, open-mindedness from her side?
Well, we took her into nature so that she lived in the real world. So we took her to national parks so she could see beauty. Really, the phone, you really have to shut down the phone. That's key, is to get rid of the phone.
Was she willing?
Oh, no, I took it. No, I actually got a safe and I locked it up along with all our iPads. And she had friends that would drop off old iPhones. Like, it was almost like a drug addict. I had to actually toss her room and find old phones, hidden in the mattress, because they get obsessive over wanting to transition and living in that world of that community, of the transgender community. And you really have to look at them as maybe like a drug addict, and you have to take that away and return them back into the real world, sending them to family, safe family. I know some people have family members who are all in. Luckily, I wasn't one of those. And people who always treated her like a girl and wouldn't change how they would treat her, even though she would say she was a boy.
Was she in a different school afterwards? Did you put her you pulled her out of that public school? Did she go to a different school, or was she really focused on healing?
I put her in another school. I put her in a Catholic school that I thought was going to be safe. It wasn't.
So what happened there? So you pulled her out of the public school. You put her in a Catholic school. She starts making new friends. Did she introduce herself as a boy or a girl at that point?
She was still introducing herself as a boy. And the Catholic school, much to my chagrin, used a male name and male pronouns for her, which was shocking to me that a Catholic school would do that. The priest actually told me that she would commit suicide. The dead daughter, live son that we hear about. And the school was going to kick me out for actually distributing Abigail Schreier's book to all of the teachers because I triggered them. So there's really, in California, there's really no safe place to educate your child, but the Catholic school was so much better than the public school. And I felt if I tried to homeschool her, that would be a really difficult task, giving her, isolation already, because that was all part of it. I mean, COVID was part of it. So she needed to be around, quote unquote, normal people, where there was a community and football games and, regular kids. So I was hoping that would pass on to her, which it did.
Were you able to find normal friends, good friends that would have a good impact on her?
Yes, and that took a while because they have a look. These kids have a look. They have their blue hair and they have their short hair and their big sweatshirts and their Hawaiian shirts, which I don't know. It's a very odd thing that they all wear Hawaiian shirts, skater pants, and so there's the trans-identified kids at the Catholic school, and they immediately can find
it's
their
like a secret handshake.
Exactly. And then once the child too has that identity, it's really hard to shake too. So the kids, the Lululemon crowd or whatever, are going to look at that other crew and they're never going to accept them. So the divide between these groups, how high school is, it's rough as it is, right? The mean girls. And so it's really hard to shake once you're pigeonholed into, the odd kid.
I mean, I would imagine also with tweens, you can't really tell them who to be friends with. They're not 7 years old anymore, right? And so that's really hard. You send her to a new environment, hoping that she's going to make new friends, and then she gravitates to what's familiar to her. So that, how did that unfold? How did you undo that damage?
Well, you can control it somewhat. So that's when you have after school activities for your child. You make sure that, the sleepovers don't happen. She wants to hang out with this person and I don't think that person's appropriate for her. I'm like, oh, well, actually we were going to go to the aquarium. So sorry, you can't hang out with her today. And so you can maneuver, and you need to, because again, your job is to safeguard your child and make sure that your child grows up healthy and with a long future. So if you have to play games and prevent bad friendships, you need to do it.
Yeah, like really step in. What about family road trips or family trips in general, just away? I mean, didn't you feel like you had to get out of the cesspool of California, especially Northern California, to kind of clean her mind a little bit?
Absolutely. And we did that. And I would do things like just get in the car, and I wouldn't tell her where we were going, and I would drive to, the beach, and we would go hiking.
You're lucky that she did that with you. Or did she go kicking and screaming?
Well, I wouldn't tell her where we were going, and so her curiosity would get to her. So I'm like, just get in the car. Just get in the car.
Was there a moment where you felt like an aha moment of, yes, okay, I think I'm getting there. I think we got there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was Christmas. I'll never forget, because we were going on a trip where she would have to wear a bathing suit, which when they're trans-identified, wearing a bathing suit is the hardest thing on the planet for them. And I had helped her pack, and I had put all these variations of bathing suits out on the bed, from the bikini that she used to steal of mine when she was little, to board shorts, to a tankini, to a one piece. I mean, I just had every bathing suit you could possibly have out. And she picked the Victoria's Secret bikini and she put it on. And I watched her look in the mirror, and she liked what she saw. And I was just beside myself, and she was going downstairs to show my husband, and I'm like texting, don't say anything. Just just keep your face straight, because you don't actually want to celebrate. You just want to be deadpan. And so I was like, oh, of course you picked the bathing suit you always stole from me. Like, you're trying to just be cool as a cucumber. And that was the bathing suit she wore on vacation. And then I knew she was back.
What are your conversations like with her now that she is back to identifying as a beautiful young lady?
We don't talk a lot about that dark time. She's only 17. She hasn't processed it all. She does make jokes about me. She calls me the gender Jesus.
We need more people like you. There's one Jesus, but we can have many gender fighters.
Yeah, I mean, she said I have some street cred with my turfiness. Anyway, we don't really talk about it because she's not ready yet, and I don't know if she'll ever be ready to talk about it. I still want to know the why, because most of these kids who are trans-identified, there's a why. There's something that happened to them. It's not organic. There's something that caused acute distress and self-loathing, and I still don't know really the why.
Do you have any hunches what you think it's about? I mean, I'd imagine, I remember being that age thinking that I'm hideous. I would I'd have a hair on my leg and I would just lose my mind. I'd freak out. I think that's all people can see, right? That one hair on the leg. It's very hard to be a young woman. It's hard to be a young man too, especially these days. On the women's side, it's very, very difficult, especially when there is so much focus on, vanity and what you look like, and if you don't look like all the other girls on Instagram. So it's hard when you have an environment that's constantly affirming that you're, in fact, born in the wrong body, on top of those, innate emotions that young girls develop.
So I think the aspect, maybe the causality, was some of the things I found on her phone once I commandeered it. There was a lot of pornography and really violent, awful pornography. And these girls, they don't want to be that woman in those porn scenes. Like when I was growing up, pornography was Playboy.
Yeah, those
right?
magazines.
Yeah. And there was no hardcore pornography that anyone could get their hands on. And now Pornhub, that's all that it is. And I don't advise anybody to do this, but I had to do this. I would go on and see what she was seeing. And it's so violent and so disgusting. And it's always the woman that's getting strangled and smashed against a wall and being defiled, that if you're a young girl and that's what you're seeing, you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be a woman if you think that that is what you need to be subjected to. So I think that's a component of it, just given the amount of pornography I found on her phone that is, by the way, it's sent to these kids.
By whom?
When a child puts on their Instagram account, MTF, male to female, this is a calling card for pedophiles. And the reason why it is because they understand that a girl is disassociating with her natural body. So they are vulnerable and they are an easy mark. So I found on her phone, luckily she didn't do this, but where they would talk about, well, you're not going to have your breasts anyway because you're really a boy. So you're going to have them removed. So why not take pictures of them and send them to me? Yes. And so this is what they do to these girls who are confused. This isn't really your body. So when you're sending a picture, it's not really you.
They're easy targets.
Oh, so easy. They're easy targets, and they are taken advantage of. And I mean, literally, I saw that on my daughter's phone with girls telling each other how to find sugar daddies and sign up with Amazon. Just tell him what you want, and he'll send it to you.
Gifts
Gifts
from random strangers.
Yes. And thank God my daughter never engaged in that, but that's what was going on with the quote unquote trans boys, the girls who thought they were boys in their chat rooms. And so that's older men taking advantage of these kids.
So my friends who have kids a little older than mine will say to me, well, we live in society and kids have phones and kids are on TikTok, but I restrict their access. So I know the people that they're watching or the people who are watching them. I know you've done a very deep dive into all of this. What's your answer to that? Can these kids live in our society without these iPhones? Or can they have the iPhones with restricted access?
Well, I'm pragmatic, but there's no need for TikTok ever. There's no need for anyone to have TikTok. It's not adding anything to anybody's life. Just get it out. I mean, social media is a time suck first and foremost. We are now raising kids that have attention spans of 30 seconds, 1 minute. They don't read anymore. This is what living online does. It is hard to tell your child that they're not going to have any social media. But I'll tell you something, these kids are way smarter than we are. And they know every workaround. And also the pushers of pornography and transgenderism are smarter than we are. So I put on pornography blockers onto my daughter's phone. YouTube can read pornography to kids. YouTube. So you can put age limitations. I tried all this stuff. Under 12, under 8, whatever you want, it's still going to get through. So anybody who wants to give their child an iPhone should really think long and hard about it. Use it for texting. You can actually tie the texting to your own computer so you can see every text message that's coming through. Is it spying on your kids? It's your job to know what's happening with your kids. Yeah, it is spying on your kids, but you need to keep them safe. And it's a very dangerous world. It's a very different world than we grew up in. There are some parental controls that may work. I didn't find one that worked.
I mean, you live in a major city in California. You know that these girls are social pariahs if they're not online. You also have access to all the apps, and you know a lot of other people who have all these restrictions and apps on phones. Would you still say it's worth pushing back against the culture and basically telling your kids, no TikTok, no social media? Would you still say that, even though they would be potential social pariahs?
Getting rid of TikTok does not make one a social pariah. I mean, that's just it's a nonsense app. There's going to be a time where you're going to have to release your child and trust your child. It's not at 12. It's not at 10. And it may not even be at 14. And you better know their password on the phone. And you better take their phone every night and go through it. Do spot checks on the phone. Make sure that things are not getting through. There's no reason for them to be on Twitter. I mean, there's a lot of social media that there's no reason for them to be on, period. So yeah, I would just be a very vigilant parent. I mean, I can't say don't have an iPhone. My daughter has her iPhone back. I check it. I have the passcode. I go into it. I sometimes just do a drive-by and say, give it to me, and just grab it so that I can see what she's up to, just to make sure that everything's safe. And then the most thing a parent can do, really, is do what I didn't do, which is you tell your child first and foremost, you cannot change sex. You are perfect just the way you are. A teacher ever tells you to keep a secret, that teacher is bad. And you start when they're little. I didn't know to do that because I trusted our schools. I trusted our teachers.
Yeah, we tell our kids, believe your teacher, behave, do what they say, and then they do what they say. And sometimes that's very dangerous. I heard about unicorn housing. What is that?
So in California right now, we passed a bill last year called AB 665, and this allows 12-year-olds and older to go to a residential facility if they don't want to live at their family's home anymore. It used to be a child could leave if there was incest, abuse, self-harm, or harm to others, but now a child can leave at 12. So when we talked about the school counselors, a school counselor can say to a trans-identified child, do you feel safe at home? And if you don't, you can go to this other place. You can go to this residential facility. California has unicorn homes. These are homes that will house kids who are 14 and older if they feel like they don't want to live at their family's homes because they're trans-identified or LGB. And California is passing a bill again this year, or they're looking at passing a bill to fund these homes on our tax dollars so that they can take more of our children when we refuse to affirm their trans identity. And that's where we're moving in California, to where parents who will not affirm, like I did, they're going to lose custody of their children. It's already happening, but now it's going to be really codified and paid for by us. It's a horrible frontier, and it needs to be stopped now.
It's like a business off our taxpayers' dollars too. I guess the incentive for these people is they can make money off the government stealing people's children and then getting paychecks for taking them.
You are so spot on. Each one of these children is worth about $14,000 a month to the facilities. So
It's
they're
sick.
This is when we talk about why this is happening. Is this a civil rights movement? No, this is all about money and sex. Each one of these trans-identified children is worth $1 million to the medical community. And then you add all this other stuff. When you take the child out of the house, who houses them? So they're making money off of the child. Now, remember, these residential facilities in California are unlocked. So that means sex traffickers, remember how we talked about that these kids are vulnerable. These sex traffickers are hanging out at these residential facilities, ready to get another child that they can now traffic. So it's huge. This movement is huge.
It's unbelievable. We talk about this in terms of California, but I really want people to know that this is not just happening in California. Some of the worst butchers are in Florida.
That's correct. It's in every single state, even states with bans. It's still happening. The Florida schools are still inundated with indoctrinators. There is not a safe state in the union. Tennessee, Arkansas, all of them. It's still happening. These kids are still being convinced that they can change sex. Maybe under 18, they can't get the surgeries, but as soon as they turn 18, they can run right to Planned Parenthood. In a 20-minute visit, they can walk out with their syringes of testosterone. We are crushing a whole generation of kids right now.
Did this change your view of Planned Parenthood, this experience?
It changed my view about everything. I used to write checks to the ACLU, to Planned Parenthood, and now they are enemy number one. I have awakened, as people would say, to really the undercurrent of what has been going on in our nation for a long time. And I was oblivious because I was a good little liberal, reading nothing but the New York Times, and never thinking to listen to anyone else but a liberal paper. And I am sorry about that, and I am very, very wrong. And that actually really spun me out just as much as it did learning about what was happening to my child, because you have this cognitive dissonance Like, how could I have been fooled for so long? But I was. I really was.
Did your experience change your view of the American Medical Association or just the medical experts in general?
Absolutely. So I come from a family of doctors and lawyers. And I never thought for a second that the AAP would be pushing gender mutilation on children. The AAP. Like, shameful, remove body parts of children, sterilizing children. The Pediatric Endocrine Society also pushes this. And the crazy part is, it's only, 20 people in the AAP that wrote this policy. Maybe it's 14, something along those lines. And all those other pediatricians stayed silent. And the cowardice of the endocrines and the surgeons and the doctors to stay silent.
They know it's bad, but they're sheep.
The pediatrician changed my daughter's name on the chart to a male name. She knew my daughter since she was 2 years old. And all she did was look at me with sad eyes and say, we're required. You're required? You're required to lie? You're required to harm a child? No, you're not. People need to stand up. I'm not courageous. I'm human. I'm moral. And everyone needs to be moral and stand up. Teachers who say, I'm just doing this to get along. I'm afraid of losing my job. Lose your job. These are children we're talking about. I have to do this. You don't. You don't have to take a knife to a child.
I agree. Lose your job. Quit.
Sue. I'm a lawyer. Sue. There's a lot of lawyers who are going to make a lot of money on this.
I hope so. I hope they sue. I hope they win. And I hope they make a lot of money off of it. Somebody has to do something. Final question. I know that you've taken all this pain that you and your family have gone through and turned it into something very meaningful. You're trying to fight for other parents and help other kids. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing and how people who are hearing this could not only gain strength from what you've gone through, but actually learn and join you in your efforts.
So right now we're working on a ballot initiative in California, which would, if we get it on to the ballot, we need to collect 550,000 signatures, ballot signatures, would define female and male in biological terms. It would stop schools from secretly socially transitioning students like they did to me. It would get all males out of girls' sports, bathrooms, and changing rooms. It's absurd that I have to say that. And it would stop all gender interventions on minors. So no puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgeries. The ballot initiative is the only way that we're going to save California, because we have a supermajority of Democrats, and we also have the Republicans that are standing in silence also, save for one. But it's up to the parents and the people to join forces. I'm a Democrat. I work with Republicans. Republicans work with Democrats to protect our kids. At protectkidsca.com is our website. You can download the petition, sign it. You can also donate. And then I'm also a co-lead of Our Duty, which is ourduty.group, and that's an advocacy group. We also do help parents find therapists that can help their kids, and we fight a lot of bills in California. But right now it's ballot initiative time, so protectkidsca.com is really where I'm focused, because we can change our state in one fell swoop. And once we change California, we change the rest of the United States, because California is a trans sanctuary state. I know you know this. Kids can run away from other states that have bans on gender interventions. And once they get in California, then they can harm themselves. We also have a law that permits doctors who violate their home state laws to run and hide in California. So gender has to end in California before it ends in the United States.
I mean, California has such an impact on the rest of the United States. Most of the education curriculum comes out of either California or Texas. So, for those who are watching who are thinking, well, this might not impact them because they don't live in California, we all know that the garbage that comes out of California oftentimes spreads throughout the United States, and we definitely need to stop this. Erin Friday, every child deserves to have a parent like you. Thank you for what you've done for your family and what you're doing for the rest of us parents. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.